When we think about the history of Missouri, most of us imagine the Santa Fe Trail, the riverboats on the Missouri River, the arrival of the American settlers in the early 19th century. At least those of us here in Arrow Rock probably think about that. But if we could stand here in Arrow Rock 300 years ago, we'd see a very different world. The river valley was not a frontier. It was the heart of a very powerful nation. And across the region that's now Missouri, Kansas, and Arkansas, the Osage Nation governed one of the most influential societies in North America. The communities that lived here were farmers and diplomats and hunters, spiritual leaders, and they helped shape this landscape for centuries. And to truly understand a deeper history of Arrow Rock, we've got to really begin with the Osage and acknowledge that the land that we gather on here today, near the Missouri River, its historic crossing, is a part of the ancestral homeland of the Osage Nation. For centuries, before the arrival of Europeans and Americans, this region formed a vital part of the Osage world. The Missouri River Valley, including what is now Saline County, supported agricultural villages, trade routes, and ceremonial landscapes central to Osage life. A division of the Osage people called the Little Osage lived throughout much of central Missouri. And they cultivated crops in these fertile river bottoms. They hunted across the prairies that surrounded it. They governed important travel corridors along the Missouri River. And places like Arrow Rock weren't empty landmarks waiting to be discovered. They were already embedded in a rich, deep Osage geography of movement and diplomacy and of community. And during the 19th century, through a series of treaties and pressures tied to American expansion, the Osage were forced to cede their Missouri homeland. Eventually, they were relocated to lands in what's now Oklahoma. But the story of the Osage people doesn't end with removal. Today, the Osage Nation continues its journey, maintaining cultural traditions and sovereignty that connects directly to this landscape and its history. Acknowledging this land reminds us that the history of this region does not begin with American settlement. It began centuries earlier with native nations who shaped the land, who shaped its economy and its cultural life. And for many years, the history of the Midwest was told primarily through the perspective of the American settler. But Osage historians have challenged that narrative. Lewis F. Burns and John Joseph Matthews, both members of the Osage Nation, are considered the foundational scholars of Osage history. And they argued that to understand places like Arrow Rock, we've got to first understand the Osage Nation that shaped it for centuries. And in the introduction to A History of the Osage Nation, Mr. Burns wrote, "If I have erred, I have tried to err on behalf of the Osages. It is time for some of the bias in favor of the Osages. There has been so much bias against them." And similarly, Mr. Matthews, in his book, The Osages, Children of the Middle Waters, emphasized the Osage worldview, describing how the Osage understood their homeland between the Missouri and the Arkansas rivers as the sacred center of life, ceremony, and governance. And he reminds us that the Osage were not just inhabitants of the land, but they were sophisticated planners, and again, diplomats and stewards of this thriving agrarian society. And when we begin the story with the Osages themselves, a very different history of the Midwest begins to emerge, one that's defined not by frontier settlement exclusively, but by native power and agriculture and diplomacy, and by a people whose understanding of the land and the waterways really shaped centuries of human history. And even as we honor the foundational contributions of Burns and Matthews, modern Osage scholars and cultural leaders remind us that history is not fixed. Knowledge of the Osage past continues to evolve as new research is conducted, as oral histories are shared, and contemporary voices interpret events in light of present understanding. So each generation adds depth and nuance to the story of the Osage Nation, ensuring that its history isn't only preserved, but it lives and that it grows, reflecting both the resilience of the Osage and the ongoing vitality of their culture and their traditions. This ongoing interpretation of the past allows us to look a little more deeply at the actual structures that defined Osage life. And long before these modern scholars began their work, the Osage Nation did build this powerful society across this region, combining the agriculture and the diplomacy and the spiritual traditions. And within that civilization emerged some remarkable individuals, including the Osage woman, Mihonga. She was also known as Sacred Sun. And her life story reflects both the upheavals of the 19th century and the enduring resilience of the Osage people. Mihonga lived during a period of dramatic transformation. After the United States acquired the Louisiana Territory in 1803, American settlers began to rapidly move into lands that were controlled by the Osages. And Mr. Burns observed that the Osage homeland sat directly across routes of American westward expansion. This is the quote from his book. 3 major routes to the west, the Missouri and Arkansas rivers and the Continental Trail, crossed Osage land, so conflict with the newcomers was inevitable. And within this turbulent era, Mihonga, her role as a representative in diplomatic and ceremonial context shows that she embodied the continuity of Osage culture and spiritual traditions, linking her generation to those before, but also to those that came after her. And one of the most remarkable episodes in her life occurred when she traveled to Europe as a part of an Osage delegation in 1827, leaving from this area. And during the early 19th century, Native leaders were sometimes invited or pressured to visit cities far from their homelands. For European and American audiences, these visits were often treated like spectacles. But for Osage leaders, they could also serve as opportunities for this diplomacy, for cultural exchange, and for representation. Yet behind the curiosity of the spectators, there stood a deeper truth. Mihonga represented a civilization that had dominated the central continent for generations, and her presence demonstrated that Osage culture and leadership and traditions continued to endure even as their homeland was being transformed by American expansion. A few years back, actually I think it was season 2 or 3 of Voices of Arrow Rock, Dr. Joan Stack, who's curator of the State Historical Society of Missouri, reminded me of Mihonga's importance in Osage history and the significance of the 1830 portrait by Charles Bird King, from which this lithograph was made. The painting captures both Mihonga's youthful dignity and her composure, reflecting the courage and the resilience that she displayed as she represented her people in unfamiliar and very challenging European contexts. Like Mihonga herself, the painting is a visual testament to the endurance and the identity and the sophistication of the Osage Nation. The 19th century brought enormous challenges to the Osage people, yet their story is not simply one of loss. Mr. Burns insisted that historians must move beyond narratives that portray Native peoples as only victims. And he wrote, "The Osages don't need or want sympathy, but they desperately need understanding." Understanding means recognizing the sophistication of Osage political systems and agricultural traditions and spiritual life. And even after relocation from Missouri, the Osage Nation maintained ceremonies and relationships and cultural traditions connecting them to their ancestral lands. Mihonga's life and the portrait that preserves her image remind us that Osage culture does endure as a living and evolving presence. While Burns and Matthews are foundational Osage historians, today a new generation of scholars and artists continue to build on their work. And for example, Dr. Andrea A. Hunter, who's a member of the Osage Nation, and she happens to be a Mizzou alum. We were in the same doctoral program. She's a noted archaeologist and historian. She brings Osage perspectives to the cultural and archaeological record of the Osage homeland, and her research really illuminates the role of Osage women, of leadership and cultural resilience, helping us understand better figures like Mihonga and know that they're not isolated individuals, but they are a part of a living and enduring Native narrative. Mihonga's story reminds us that the Osage homeland along the Missouri River, including Saline County and Arrow Rock, wasn't merely a backdrop for settlement, but it was the center of a thriving civilization where their leadership and their ceremonies and the stewardship of the land really helped shape this region for centuries. And the history of this landscape looks very different when it's viewed through the lens of the Osage. The Osage were one of the most powerful nations in North America. And the Little Osage anchored that power along the Missouri River, including this region that we call home here in Arrow Rock. Individuals like Mihonga remind us that this history is not only about the land and the politics, but it's also about the people who carried the culture forward through periods of significant change. And today, the Osage Nation maintains traditions that stretch back centuries before the United States ever existed. And recognizing that history allows us to see the Midwest not simply as a frontier for American expansion, but as a homeland shaped for generations by the strength of the Osage, the people of the Middle Waters. This deep connection to the land and its history continue through the storytelling of Elise, whose script honors the journey that Mihonga took to Europe, and the artistry of Lulu Goodfox, who brings her voice to life today. Through them, we witness the ongoing vitality of the Osage people. Without further ado, Voices of Arrow Rock, Washoshe, Brave.
Away, welcome theater goers. Jinka Owekion, Jajeabri. My name is Jinka Owekion. I am Osage, born and raised in Osage Nation in Oklahoma. And something that's been instilled in me since I was a small child was to honor who we come from by carrying their stories, the strength and memories of my ancestors. You are here today to learn a story about some Osages who dared to venture all the way across the Atlantic to a scary place known as France. I know. Now you might be asking yourselves, why would a bunch of natives from Missouri want to go to France to see a bunch of French people? Well, let me tell you about Osages. We don't back down. Before I begin the story, I must introduce you to Mihonga, who was born near Arrow Rock around 1809 and died around 1836. She was a courageous and an adventurous Osage woman who lived during a period of intense upheaval for our people and was one of the Osages who traveled to France in 1827. The French described her as particularly beautiful. They noted how noble and gracious her gestures were. A real elegant Osage woman. Mihonga was resilient, courageous. Mihonga was brave, washoshe. My iko, my grandmother.
Dali, wewina, zinka oakia. Thank you for your kind words. It's important that you carry forward and preserve our traditions and culture to keep our stories alive. This was a hard time for our people when Ishtahe moved closer and closer.
You all had relationships with the fur traders, right, Iko?
Yes, we got along with the French fur traders the most.
Better than the British or Americans, that's for sure. How many of you know about buffalo robes? They were an especially hot trade item in the 1800s. Monzeska, that's what power is, right? In the old world, that's for sure. In the new world, and even now. Monzeska, money. To survive, we had to sell our wares, our skills, ourselves, until we can retire or keep on chasing Monzeska until we have what we want. Our ancestors recognized this. They joined the trade.
Our elders, our leaders saw the world changing around us, so we adapted to ensure our people would survive. We built up a rapport with some of the French fur traders in exchange for beads, weapons, Monzeska.
This is true. But eventually, deals were made, treaties broken, betrayals and battles, all because of land. And thus, Native people across all what is now the United States were driven further and further west and onto reservations. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself. The story that I'm telling you today begins just before Jackson's Indian Removal Act and before the Osages were forcibly removed to Kansas, when we still lived in Missouri, many right here in what is now Arrow Rock area, like Mihonga.
I come from the land along the Missouri River, where my family and tribe live. We hold into our ways, our traditions, and rely on Wakanda to guide us. Kahika Shinka's great-grandfather had traveled to France before. Perhaps making that journey would be good for us now as well.
And they did. They found interpreters to aid them in their journey to France. Listen, you know me, your friend, Eleni. You can trust me. I am friends with Monsieur Chateau. Well, come with me to France. Huh? They will love you. Right, yeah, trust him. Beyond Delaney, there was another French fur trader named Paul Louise. Yes, I can go over there with you all. It is no trouble at all to aid you.
Meriwether Lewis appointed Paul Louise as their translator in the past. We trusted him.
Delaney and I will be sure to take care of you all there, Kahika Shinka.
Kahika Shinka, who many call Little Chief, seemed to trust these Ishtahe and told us his great-grandfather went to France. He said it sounds different, yet spoke fondly of France. Kahika Shinka said it would make his great-grandfather proud if we all took this journey for ourselves. He thought perhaps we would find a way to help our people, learn from them. He thanked Delaney and Lewis for offering to be our guides.
There are many stories about why they went, but no one truly knows. The outcome was the same. 6 Osages left, following a man who turned out to be Biji, no good. They followed him from their home in Missouri all the way across the vast sea. Maybe they were tricked, told that they were going to meet the president in D.C. Maybe they chose to travel to France. But those who made the trip faced it as all Wajaje would, with courage. Wajaje is the name for our people, before the French butchered it into Osage.
For years, 4 years, our men trapped, traded, and worked to raise funds to travel from Missouri to France. Originally, 25 Osages were going to make the trip, but when the time came, only 12 people chose to travel. On our way down to the Missouri River to St. Louis, our boat wrecked and we lost the furs we had spent years collecting. Half of the party decided to go home. They believed it was a sign for us not to continue. But we were determined. 5 others and I went on, and while in St. Louis, That's where we ran into Delaney. We had met him before. We liked him. We trusted him. He was heading back to France, and he was a known businessman. Surely he would be the perfect man to help us in our journey. Many of us spoke French well enough to converse with fur traders, but it would be helpful to have Frenchmen as our guides.
So, 6 Osages embark on their journey. Their ages ranged from 18 to 45. Kahika Shinka, little chief. Mihonga, who the Americans and British called Sacred Son, she was the youngest. Gide Doing, Hawk Woman. Kahika Shinka's second in command, Washinka Sabe, Black Spirit or Blackbird. Mingcharohu, Little Soldier. And the eldest, Monshon Akita Tonka, Big Soldier, also known as the Orator.
It was a long and difficult voyage, and it took us 2 months to arrive in France. We docked at Le Havre.
Present-day Normandy.
Thousands of French people were there to greet us. Having heard the news that we were Osages, were traveling to their country, it was overwhelming, but not for Big Soldier. He declared, "You see, you think you scare us? No, we left our village to go visit our friends, the French, and all the people on the other side of the Great Lake. Nothing will be able to deter us from it, besides death."
And all of the French people got incredibly excited to see them disembark. Mama, let me see! Oh, look at that dark hair, that skin. Oh, it is my first time seeing a power rouge in the flesh. Let me touch it. Those eyes, so dark.
These French people swarmed us like vultures. They flooded the streets. They were hanging from ship masts, all just to catch a glimpse of us. The women were in dresses with long sleeves and big hats, while the men were dressed in coats similar to soldiers we have seen, with buttons and tails. We liked the women's dresses.
At noon, July 27th, 1827, the French first saw the Redskins they'd only heard about in writing. It was written that their costume, their arms, the color of their reddish copper skin, the beauty and regularity of their immobile features, everything about them was an object of surprise. Everyone pushed near them to touch their hands and to receive from them a gesture gracious and full of nobleness.
A platoon of regular troops was needed to get us safely from the docks to the Holland Hotel. We were shown the pleasures of France, art galleries where there was a very well-done marble statue, the nice harbor, and, of course, the theater. We sat in a box seat, and the theaters were packed with people. These people did not come to watch the show. They came to gaze upon us, the Osages who were watching theater. At some shows, even the actors, while performing, would be staring at us.
Remember, they are inside a box seat, inside a packed theater in the middle of summer, and now they are watching a bad opera while being gawked at. A commenter wrote, "The Osages hide their emotions with great skill, and that they never make any exterior sign of the boredom they are feeling." And as always, they were swarmed by people.
We were greatly disappointed with the protections given to us by the French. Little Chief stood up for us, saying, "In my country, 4 soldiers are sufficient to contain 8 or 10,000 Indians at a very great distance. We will never go to another spectacle from now on. If we brave the dangers of the sea, it is not to then be suffocated on the other side of the Great Lake." At one showing, we were surrounded by people. We moved to a different area, and they followed us so quickly we were nearly crushed. The guards helped little against that many people.
These Osages even had an appearance with the royal court, attending diplomatic dinners, and met the king. Kahika Shinka had a good visit with the king and mentioned that his great-grandfather visited the king in his time. King Charles X of France requested that, since Osages for generations had been well received, why, if some French people decided to travel to Osage country, they should receive the same protections. Right.
Up to this point, we were accompanied by guards. We moved up to Rouen along the River Seine and were invited to Chateau de Courvillon by Duchess of Fitzjames. We were entertained with dancing, riding, and various sports.
Oh, I bet they loved this. As a warrior society, they now had a chance to engage with something active rather than the more quiet activities they've been exposed to thus far, and to see more of the French military. Was it fun?
Yes, of course. We enjoyed the activity and learning more about the French. A little later, before we left our hotel, we were greeted by the people and waved goodbye from our balconies before we went on our way to Paris.
Ah, yes, the city of love and grime. Can you guess how they were received?
With crowds and crowds. In Paris, we met Ange Cormion, the French Minister of Foreign Affairs. We thought this would be the ideal opportunity for us to speak as dignitaries of their nations. However, at this breakfast, there were also 40 other attendees. We were not afforded the opportunity of a private audience with the minister.
Mm-hmm. So far, we have them being stalked, bombarded by the French, and paraded around to different officials within the French government and monarchy. Do you think that the Osages spent 4 years gathering furs to simply go on a vacation to France, while America was encroaching into their homelands? But that meant little to them. Oh, the French minister made sure that these savages were well entertained while hosting them in his homeland. The Osages had familiarized themselves with the customs of the society in Europe and the manner of living, learning and adapting to how French people lived in order to maintain some level of respect. But the French people did not see them as equals. They saw the Osage as entertainment, a novelty, nothing more.
Oui, Georges pas. Let me tell you a story about Kahikashinka that illustrates this. It is true, Monsieur Delaney charged the public to see us. On one occasion, he arranged for a hot air balloon to take us into the sky.
And Delaney asked, "Do you really intend to make the ascent?"
When Kahikashinka was questioned about his courage, as a true Osage man, he promptly climbed aboard, telling everyone that when he decided to leave his country and brave the dangers of a very long voyage to see his brothers in Europe, no one could doubt his courage. Nothing was going to keep him from going into the sky. He both impressed and startled the French crowd when he began singing a prayer song as he rode into the balloon above the crowds. He sang from his heart. The French found it entertaining. They had never heard anything like our songs.
Some say that the Osages went to France for curiosity and to earn money. However, our good friend Delaney did not pay them their fair share. And he owed a debt of 9,000 francs from the year 1799, and it caught up with him. 9,000 francs was a lot of money in that time. Today, it is more than 50,000 US dollars.
Monsieur Delaney went to trial in France, where his character was examined by his treatment of us Osages alongside his partner, Paul Louis. A French missionary, Charles Delacroix, was their interpreter. Blackbird said that we were not mistreated. However, a maid testified that we were being held practically hostage. She used the term in bondage. Delaney was arrested for his debts. We were abandoned. The abandonment was indeed like being in bondage, and the Europeans lost interest in us Osages.
One writer said that Osages became as common as sonnets. These people were not seen as people. They were seen as objects to be profited by.
Once we were forced to stand on top of a billiard table in a casino and gawked at for change. Geeth the Doan Hawkwoman and I could not look at them. It was humiliating to be treated like animals.
I am so sorry, Iko. It is said that the women lowered their head in shame and wept. This is not how you treat people, especially not dignitaries of a tribe, but this was all too common. For native people to be treated as human zoos. Oh, but the Europeans loved them, right? There is a lot of mystery about this story. Why did the Osages go to Europe? What did they do once they were abandoned? Some people say that they were beggars on the streets, but I do not believe that to be the complete truth. While we Osages are humble people, we also have pride in who we are. I can see them asking for help, but begging, that feels like a stretch, especially for people of their status. They did find some joy in Belgium, albeit short-lived.
While we were stranded in Belgium, I gave birth to twin girls on February 10th, 1829. I named them Maria Elizabeth and Maria Teresa. They were beautiful babies, Pagine Odaza. We baptized them at St. Denis.
It is said that one baby came out lighter than the other, hinting at a mixed baby. Who might the father be, you might ask? Well, it was common for traders to have country wives, and it was speculated that Mihonga was Paul Louis' country's wife. Other accounts say that she was the wife of Black Hawk or Little Chief. Either way, what we know is that she had twins.
Yes, they were lovely baby girls. Mina, Sisi, Wiha, Jinka.
Her firstborn was strong and the second was small. Soon after their birth, the twins were separated. Maria Theresa was adopted by a wealthy Belgian family, and she died within a year. Why? Why might Mihonga have had to make the heartbreaking decision to let one of her children be adopted? Could she not provide for both children in the way she would have if she had had them back home with her tribe? Did Paul Louise sell the child? We might never know. But what we do know is that there is a little Osage baby buried far away from home.
Soon after Maria Theresa's death, our party was divided, though I do not know why. Half of us found shelter in Montauban, where a Jesuit missionary, Bishop Louis Guillaume Dubourg, showed us kindness. We had known him from when he came to visit us back at home. The others went to plead our case with the Marquis de Lafayette. With their help, we finally secured passage back home in 1830, but 2 of our people did not survive the journey, taken by smallpox along the way. The spirits of Washinka Sabe and Mink Charahu were called home.
Even Paul Louise, who some say was faithful to the Osages, knew that if he returned to Missouri, he would have to deal with the repercussions of their deaths. 6 Osages went abroad, 2 died in Europe, and 5 returned. That is true. Maria Elizabeth survived the journey home, and so they returned with a new Osage baby. Why would they risk a journey over to France?
Osages do not back down. We look out for our people. We try to do right by them, always.
As an Osage descendant, Jinka Olakion, I believe that they were over there to learn, to engage with the leaders in a meaningful way, to improve their way of life at home. Instead, they were paraded around like a freak show.
We are adopted people. We cared for and trusted Delaney and Louise. We sometimes trust people who don't always deserve to be trusted. 5 years after our return, 1835, while leading the Treaty of Conference at Fort Gibson, representing our people, Little Chief talked about our travels, saying, "I have traveled all over the world to learn the means to render my people happiness without success. While we did not achieve what we wanted, we continue to forge a better path with the changing landscape at home to ensure our people not only survive, but thrive."
We are known as children of the Middle Waters, Niukoska, or Wazaji people, the Osage Nation today. We fight for our people.
We know this. We are warrior people. We fight for peace. We fight to ensure our elders, our children, our grandchildren, and their children are able to survive as Wazaji people. We do not always receive what we want, but we must trust in Wakanda to carry our people forward, to walk the path that is forged for us. In this new world, we must be resilient, courageous, Washoje.
No amount of corruption, betrayals, or oppressions through the centuries will be able to take this fundamental truth away from us.
We are the children of the stars and the sky and the earth. We walk through this life knowing where we come from and where we will return to.
Way we know. Thank you for visiting with me, Iko.
Washkon. Either way, you did good. Do your best, granddaughter. I'll see you later.
Either way, see you later, Iko.
You have, the title of your play uses the Osage word washoshe, brave. And could you kind of kick us off here by sharing what specific concept of bravery meant to the historical figures that you researched and how you kind of shaped the voice of Mihanga to include that?
Well, I started first with visiting with some people back home. And so I talked to my godfather, John Maker, who's actually related to some of the folks that went to France. And as he kind of told me his perspective about things, that's, we had talked about it being courageous and things like that. And he was like, I think that they are brave. And that's just kind of how we have to be. That's what I feel like a lot of our culture permeates to this day. And so a connection that I feel between our generation and Mihanga is that sense of bravery, right? And we talk about resilience and just holding on to that. And to be able to leave this area, because we're landlocked, number one, and to travel down that river and trust that you're going to make it all the way that way and be around all of that, you have to have some sense of bravery and dignity to survive all of that, right? And so I was like, this makes sense to me because I feel like everybody in that journey had to have that sense. And so John, he was the one who was really emphasizing how brave they had to be.
Thanks so much. That's great. Mm-hmm. Tom and Ethan are going to run around with a microphone here for anybody who has questions because we want to make sure we capture your question on the archived video. So who's got a question? Lead off. Oh, you have one right down here. Tom, you got the microphone? We're right over here. Raise your hand again, please. Yeah, there you go. Ryan, have we got this mic? It's on. You're good to go. Yeah, you're good to
go. It's a great treat to hear the Osage language, especially in these parts. Would you talk a little bit about the state of the Osage language and maybe your own fluency? And also, I'd love to know a little bit about, it's also great to see the Osage alphabet on the front here. Just curious about your perspective on that and where it's going and how it is.
So for the Osage Nation, we do not have any fluent speakers, that is their first language. We don't have any people like that left. But we do have a language department who does really, really wonderful work. They have classes in person for adults and youths. They've also got, you can be on Zoom and learn it that way. We have a dictionary, we have an app, we have children's books. They are really, really working on ensuring that our people can still speak our language. And they've got different types of recordings and stuff that you can listen to as well. We've also got an immersion school for kids, it's a Head Start program. And so some of our kids are speaking it better than the adults can at this point, right? And for me, I wouldn't even say I speak at an elementary level. No. I know how to read our alphabet. And so a lot of these, I just kind of had to sound out. And I spent some time, it's going to be a lifelong process because Osage is such a specific language. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's a tonal language, but it almost is with difference between a nasal or a non-nasal sound. And, but yeah, I've taken some language classes. And I try to study that we have textbooks that come out. We have our dictionary. I literally just sit down and read the dictionary sometimes. So I hope that answers your question.
Got a question back there, Tom.
Okay, I actually have two questions, and I hope this doesn't expand the scope here. But my first question is, what do you think makes you Osage, or what makes somebody Osage? And secondly, we talked a lot now about, you talked a lot about Osage relations to French people or Americans, Europeans. How were actually relations between Osage and other native tribes, especially with displacement and further through the history?
And as you're thinking about the answer to that question, this is one of the Missouri Valley College students. And Julius, you're from Germany, correct? So we have a European perspective coming into today.
Do you have anything that you want to say to that before I go into my spiel?
You can go into your spiel for that one.
So your first question of asking what makes me Osage, right? And so I think that boils down to one, literally who I come from. So both of my parents are Osage, and their parents, like my grandpa on my dad's side, and my grandma and my grandpa on my mother's side. And so I come from Chief Pahuska the First, who is what our Osage Nation capital comes from on my mother's side, and Chief Nico Washatanka, who was one of our last hereditary chiefs within the Osage Nation on my father's side. And I've been raised as close as within as much tradition as I can. I never claimed to be the most traditional person ever. Even as I just answered, I can't really speak our language, but I think that is a vital part. And a part of what makes us Osage is kind of how we interact with each other, how we take care of each other, and how we participate in our culture. We have our Lonchka dances. We have different kind of ceremonies and ways of being that we really try to kind of uphold in that way. And that's something that's been instilled in me since I was a baby, is knowing who I come from, where we come from, and trying to continue that way of life. It's not necessarily it's not something you can put down and pick back up. It's how you are, and it's how you live. It's who you come from. All of these things encompass that. And you were talking about the relationship with Europeans and Americans and French people specifically. Can you repeat that part of that question?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to know how Osage got along with other Native American tribes.
Yeah. So okay, hang on, pause. There was a group of 5 different tribes that kind of really worked well together. So there's Kaw, Ponca, Sioux, and I can't really remember all of them. Sorry? Omaha. Thank you, Mama. That's my mom. So we all of these tribes, we kind of work together, and even our languages are somewhat similar, right? And we are a warrior society, and so sometimes that might mean that we didn't necessarily get along with everybody. And there's a few different tribes like that. I think the first one that comes off the top of my head is the Cherokee Nation. Sometimes we kind of clashed a little bit, but we kind of smoothed that over because we're neighbors now in Oklahoma. And yeah, it just kind of varied and depends. So, it's normal. When you're neighbors with somebody, sometimes you clash. And if you have different viewpoints of whatever it is, sometimes you clash. But yeah, it's the same with Europe, Sometimes Germany and England are not getting along, or vice versa, whoever, wherever. So, yeah.
Yes, we have a question down front here.
Thank you all very much for this presentation. I'm curious. I'm sure my question would be answered quite differently by individuals, but I'm curious about the relationships between what I think I understand is a native spiritual religious tradition based in the land and creation, in contrast with traditional European Christianity, which was introduced to the native peoples, and often in some cases forced upon the native peoples. Is that what's the nature of that legacy, if it's possible to say, because I'm sure there are individual variations and determinations?
So you're asking about how Christianity has influenced our older religion, right?
Correct, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a lot of things that are kind of encompassed in that, but I'll speak about how we kind of are today. A lot of Osages are actually Catholic. That's who came around us a lot, and we've kind of incorporated that. So even at our funerals, you'll have some more traditional ceremonies and practices, and then you'll also have a rosary. So, yeah, and we'll have a funeral mass, and so these things happen in tandem and next to each other, and they're not necessarily completely separate. Though not every Osage is Catholic, and not every Catholic Osage participates within our ceremonies, right? And so it, like you said, it varies from person to person. But today, we're able to practice both, basically. Did you have anything you want to add? No?
Here's a question for Lulu. You served in 2023 and 2024 as the Osage Nation princess.
Yep.
Could you explain to us the roles and responsibilities of the princess and what you enjoyed the most about your time, but also what was the most challenging part of your time?
Okay, so yes, I was appointed princess my sophomore year of high school, so I was the youngest princess the Osage Nation has ever had. So I was very nervous, obviously, going into that role. And it's something the committee they ask of it. You're not like nominated and stuff, so it's an honor to be asked. I would say my favorite and most challenging part of it was during Killers of the Flower Moon came out during my reign, so I got to travel the world and represent our people and my nation on the red carpet and speak about our people. So I would say that was also the most challenging thing for me because I did not want to let anyone down back at home, and I was just very nervous. But in the end, I feel like I did a very great job, and it wasn't just glamorous, but I also traveled all around Oklahoma. I got to go to a lot of powwows every weekend. I was at a different one, 3 hours away or 1 hour away, and I made friends with all the other tribes' princesses, so I got to experience their cultures and everyone else's foods within Oklahoma, too. So
That's great. Congratulations on that. And maybe as a follow-up, you all could share for us, for the audience, what is a powwow and what takes place at the powwows?
a powwow is just like a celebration of just being Indian, Native American. So it's different for every tribe, obviously, but they sing their songs and everyone just dances. So, and then you eat dinner with your family, and I don't know, you try and describe this better.
And so, like, because it comes from like a way back whenever they first kind of put us all into Oklahoma, to my understanding, right? And so you have all of these Native people that are kind of displaced from their typical homelands for the most part, and they still wanted to hold on to some of those ways and kind of share that with each other. So we have what we call like intertribals. So you have multiple tribes coming together to dance and be with each other in that way and kind of uphold that. And it's kind of morphed more today where we'll have like contests. So you have like fancy dancers. That's where you get like these big bustles and these guys who dance really quick. And you have like fancy shawl dancers who, like, these women are out there. They have their arms out like this and they're also dancing just beautifully and like on their toes. They look like they're flying. Or like straight dancers, which is kind of what we're more accustomed to. And things of that nature. So you have just, it's a lot of Native people were really competitive. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you get these contests from. And so they're contesting for money and like things like that. So you'll see like littles, we have like tiny tots, they don't really contest. I mean, they do, but they all get a little prize and, stuff like that. But we go all the way up, you contest as long as you can and you dance as long as you can. And then intertribals is when more people are welcome to come out there and participate. But it's more of a social thing.
Yeah.
It
usually starts around like 6 or 7 and ends around like 11 to 12. Like they're long nights, but
and then
there's
sometimes
so
they
much
have stuff
fun.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
So you can be out until real late at night.
And it's hot during the summer, but everyone's just there to have fun.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions here from the audience? Oh, we got a couple on this side of the room. Caitlin, and then we have, who is that over there? Oh, Autumn. Okay.
Hello.
Microphone.
Hi.
Hey.
First of all, I'm out here, Mike.
Oh, there you go. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Jason. Okay.
First of all, wonderful performance, and you all did an excellent job. Learned a lot. On my way here, I had just watched the Alton Brown video this morning on cooking, and we had broke bread together yesterday. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, what is the impact of the Osage community in the culinary scene? So I was thinking, what are some of the foods that you all cook and how impactful you all think, not just Osage, but as Native Americans overall, been to the culinary art scene within America. Because I think that's something that's, from what I know, it might be out there, but I never thought of. But what do you all think was brought to the table?
You cook a lot. Do you want to go or do you want me to start?
Well, my mom's a head cook, so she for the Osages. So we have our fry bread. This is just our most common. It's bread that is fried. They're kind of like beignets, but we eat them with every single meal. So even as sweets, you put honey on them, and then oh my gosh, there's so much.
I think about like squash
squash.
and corn. Like those are all things that are native to here, to like North America. Similarly with like potatoes. Potatoes are from here as well. Pumpkins, like I guess that's a squash. But yeah, I mean, like for Osages, we put a lot of value into our meals.
Yeah.
And you know, we talk a lot about how you can't survive without that food, and so we put a lot of like prayers and thoughts into the food that we provide, especially for feasts and stuff like that. And it's a good way to celebrate and come together.
We pray before every meal. Yeah.
Great answer. And speaking of food, the tavern is open today for lunch. So if you want to come join us for the buffet, they will do that. We've got time for a couple more questions. I know Autumn had one, Caitlin, and looks like Myra's got a question. So let's grab those 3 questions.
This is hypothetical, but how do you think the voyage, their time spent in France would have been different had all 25 gone, so a bigger group, and had they had their items for trade, those furs? Like, do you think that would have changed how they were treated and the things that they would have been able to accomplish, like whatever their possible goals were, had they had a larger group and their items for trade?
I think about that.
That's an amazing question.
Yeah.
That's a
Do you
great
have any
question.
thoughts?
No, but now I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking.
Because I really think that a bigger delegation would have been better.
Yeah.
And they lost a lot of those things that they were going to give not only to trade, but they were going to give them as gifts. Because that's kind of a part of how we are. We, you know, when we go visit somebody, we bring them something. And because I truly, truly think that they saw like these American forces coming over here and they said, how do we stop them from still like pushing us like they have the rest of these people over here? And there's still a lot of people who have like French names and like French Osage people, right? Because I think I'm like a quarter French or something. And so we were close with some of these like fur traders, right? Of course we didn't get along with all of them, but the French we kind of got along with. And I think of them going to them to help, to be like, hey, you French people, you know how these British people are. Can you help us figure out how to make sure they don't mess with us? And instead they were met as being paraded around, right? I think that if they had a bigger delegation, they would have been forced to listen more. I think because if you have 6 people sat here with 40 other French people, freaky. And you're not going to be able to get a word in edgewise, right? But if there was 25 Osage people with these 40 at that Minister of Foreign Affairs brunch, that would have been a bit more, it would have been more easy to get their points across, I think. So I think that it would have changed the landscape of where we are currently if there was a bigger delegation. And if, I don't know about like the things they came to trade, but I do think that it would have helped them to not get stuck there because they were stuck for 3 years without a way to get home because Delaney just ended up, he's like, okay, I got in trouble, so I'm going to leave y'all. Let me just leave. And so they did. And but we still have a relationship with Montauban, actually, which is where we met that Jesuit priest. It's a sister city in conjunction with Pawhuska, which is the capital of the Osage Nation. So we still have a relationship going on there.
We would not be the same had we had all 25 people go and have a stronger force with us. But yeah.
We have a question right here.
I was just curious to know more about Osage spirituality and its connection to the Missouri River Valley region.
I don't think that that's something that I can speak on. Thank you, though.
Yeah, I don't.
And then Myra, we'll take that as our last question.
You're both beautiful, cheerful young women, and thank you for your performance. I'm curious, as survivors of a orchestrated effort to destroy the indigenous people of this country, survivors really of genocide, how you feel. Do you feel animus towards our government, towards those who came and tried to destroy? How have you reconciled that to be who you are?
I definitely think that there's a distrust for me. However, we have a lot of Osage people who are veterans. And so we've had a lot of our people, because if you look at any war, a lot of people who volunteer first to fight for this country are Native Americans across every single tribe. And it's personally, I do feel a distrust for this government, no matter who is in office. I always have. But it depends on how they try to interact with us, right? And I think that there's still a lot of work to be done.
And do they try to interact? Do they try to interact with you?
What do you, the tribes?
No, yes, with the tribe. Does the government try to interact with the...
Well, the government, the United States government has a Bureau of Indian Affairs, which directly coordinates with the tribal governments. And so, yes, like they have to. We've also got a lot of treaties, whether or not they were upheld, right, that they are having to refer back to. So yeah, the government and the, like, at least federally recognized tribes, they're in conversation.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything to it? Okay. These were great questions, and it just continues to add to our education about the Osage here in the area. So appreciate your participation in the program today. Thank you all for the wonderful performance. It was great. And come join us for lunch at the tavern. We're headed over there in just a couple of minutes. So thank you all.
Thank you.